Hello and welcome to Dangerous Science with Kent Heckenlively. I'm your host, Kent Heckenlively, and today we're talking about my new book with Dr. Judy Mikovits, Plague of Corruption, Restoring Faith in the Promise of Science. Okay, so what I decided to do is put together a little reader's guide for people, just a quick 5 or 10 minute video on different sections of the book. So as you're reading through it, you can come back to this, and if there's anything that I've left unclear, hopefully I'll answer those questions here. Okay, so we're going to start with Chapter 1, which I entitled A Scientist at Sea. And I did it because this was just kind of a writer's dream, okay? So what happened to Dr. Judy Mikovits in 2011? Well, she was fired from her job at the Neuroimmune Institute. She founded because, as she claimed, she was asked to do some unethical things. Well, you know, people have differences with their bosses and everything, so maybe that's not too much of a surprise, not a big shock. But then in October of 2011, as she was riding her bicycle in Southern California, it appeared very clearly that she was under surveillance. There was a man in a white pickup truck who was following her. He was taking pictures of her. So this was something that really set off alarm bells for Dr. Mikovits. In early November of 2011, her house was under surveillance. There were some strange people who'd moved into another house very close by. It seemed like they had spotlights almost shining on her house. And she had been sued by her former employers, but and she responded, a second lawsuit had been attempted to be filed on her. It seemed very strange. There was just this overwhelming feeling of surveillance on her. In fact, her attorney, Mike Hugo, was later able to get an admission that she was under surveillance by California and Nevada police and perhaps others. So this was very her feelings were accurate, that she was under some type of surveillance, and she just felt that this was wrong and that there was something else going on. And then we come to November 18th, 2011, where her house was surrounded by 3 police cars. She was taken into custody. Her house was searched top to bottom. The police also arrived at the home of the woman a friend of hers who had faxed her response to the first lawsuit. That woman was also subjected to search. She was basically made to sit in a chair for several hours while police went top to bottom. Okay, and so then after that, Dr. Mikovits was forced to stay in jail for 5 days without bail. She viewed this as an intimidation tactic. She was eventually released on jail. And so for people who hear that part of the story, they may say, wow, there must have been something really terrible. She must have done something wrong. But the fact remains, no charges have ever been filed against Dr. Mikovits for doing a single thing wrong. So let's think about what that really means. I'm not saying that she was charged and not convicted. I'm saying no charges were ever filed against her in any court of law. So it really did seem like there was this incredible effort to smear her reputation. Now, why was there that effort to smear her reputation? Well, she must have uncovered some inconvenient truths, and those in power must have been very interested in making sure that her reputation was ruined. So, this is in the public record. You can look at it. But what you're not going to find is you're not going to find people asking the question, well, if she's so terrible, why wasn't she charged with anything? Why wasn't she convicted? Why wasn't some sort of trial held? Well, they can't give an answer to that. And the reason they can't give an answer to that is because Dr. Mikovits is an honest scientist. She's very ethical. She's really kind of a squeaky clean person, a real straight arrow, okay? Just like me. I'm a real straight arrow. I'm really boring in my normal life. Okay, Chapter 2, A Rebel from the Start. As a writer, I kind of felt like this was really important that I talk about who Dr. Mikovits is, and to let you know that even from the very beginning of her career, honesty and integrity have been very important to Dr. Mikovits. In summer of 1987, Dr. Mikovits left the National Cancer Institute to go work at Upjohn Pharmaceuticals in Kalamazoo, Michigan, okay? She had been born in Michigan. She was a Detroit Tigers fan, so this was kind of like a nice thing to do. And so she, and you know, the pay was great, you know, much better than government work. Okay, so for those who kind of have this question in their mind of whether Dr. Mikovits is just a troublemaker, I thought that it was important in this chapter to go over how she attacked certain problems. So one of the problems that Upjohn had at that time was they had a drug called Atgam, which was used for transplant patients, and it was made from human blood. Well, if you know your history, you know that in 1987, the HIV/AIDS epidemic was in full swing, and we knew that HIV could be transmitted in the blood. So when you're making a blood product, a product from human blood, and there's HIV out there, you want to know if the manufacturing process is getting rid of that virus, okay? So Dr. Mikovits had a lot of background in answering just those kind of questions. So in combination with her former employer, the National Cancer Institute, and Dr. Frank Ruscetti, they devised a series of experiments which looked at the manufacturing process. It actually required Dr. Mikovits to fly back every week on the corporate jet for Upjohn from Kalamazoo, Michigan, back to Washington, D.C., and perform those experiments at the National Cancer Institute. So what they found was that the process did work, that it did deactivate any HIV that might have been in the blood. She suggested a couple small changes, but really, the process was great. You know, it was safe. They were decontaminating the blood through the manufacturing process, and you really didn't have to worry about HIV getting into people through this drug Atgam. Okay, so I really tell that story to highlight the fact that Dr. Mikovits is a problem solver, and she's just going to go where the evidence leads. Okay, not so lucky when they also asked her to look at the safety of their bovine growth formula. Okay, so at the beginning of this, Dr. Mikovits thought that, you know, it's a great idea to use growth hormone to get cattle quicker to maturity, all this stuff. It looks great. She just wanted to make sure it was safe. So she designed a number of experiments looking at the question of what happens in cell culture when you put in the bovine growth formula, and she found that it was profoundly affecting the cell cultures. There's a condition called blebbing, in which, you know, the cells just kind of swell up, the cellular membrane is disrupted, all of these problems. And since Dr. Mikovits, you know, really entered into science very early in the days of HIV/AIDS, everybody's thinking about retroviruses, and also the fact that her boss, Dr. Frank Ruscetti, and collaborator, it really is one of the people who opened up the field of human retrovirology. So she was thinking about, well, what we know about viruses is that if your system is disrupted, then viruses that may have been silenced may spring up and start causing problems again. They may be expressed, to use the scientific term. So, you know, we're all composed of viruses. The human beings are about 7 to 8% of our genome is silenced viruses. So she raised the question of whether this bovine growth hormone might be causing the expression of bovine leukemia virus in these cattle. So it really was a big controversy because Upjohn didn't want to hear about it, and eventually resulted in her leaving the company. But then we fast forward to 2015, a team from the University of California, Berkeley, found that there was a high number of positive test results of bovine leukemia virus in breast cancer tissue. And so this is released by UC Berkeley. You know, you don't get much more authoritative than Berkeley. And what they also said is this association with breast cancer and this bovine cow leukemia virus is higher than smoking, it's higher than alcohol, it's higher than obesity. So we really can't answer the question of whether growth hormones are causing cattle to express viruses or other animals to express viruses, which then wind up in humans. But it is something that needs to be investigated. And, right from the start of her career, Dr. Mikovits was very interested in these questions, getting to the bottom of them. So, hope that's some interesting information for you, and I'll see you on the next episode.